Guys, another CEO Wisdom Pod AI edition with Alexander Alten. He's CEO and founder at Databloom.ai. We were talking about beautiful Malta, where Alex is in the Mediterranean Sea. I was telling him that in less than 10 years, I'm going to be on my yacht, traveling and having a nice Italian cook me the best food, healthiest food there is on this planet. Alex is already in Malta and somewhat living one of his best versions of his life. Alex, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and tell us a bit more about your company, Databloom.ai?
Hey, Charles. Yeah, thank you, and to be part here. So yeah, as you mentioned, I live in Malta right now, so it's the opposite of Florida, same weather but no alligators. And yeah, I'm developer, big data guy since maybe 15 years. I've worked on Hadoop and other open source projects. Founded multiple startups, and Databloom.ai is my last one, the latest one, or the last one, hopefully. And for Databloom, we tackle the problem of data silos and data regulation, and building a virtual layer on top of data stores so that you can do machine learning, AI, data analytics across your data park without moving the data to a central location.
Love it. And this is a very cool niche. First, you're in deep tech. Second, we know like that once startups like snowflakes are exploding right now, every company is adapting to these new data lakes environments and so forth. You charge 2.8K like your first plan. How many free vs paid customers do you have right now?
So we have, since we have also an open source project, Apache Wayang, there we have roughly 500,000 users or downloads. You can't really measure it because it's some kind of a library you plug into your application's code. So we know a few big ones using it, and we have also contributions from multiple bigger companies in that case. And for the paid one, we are in the pre-seed phase right now, so we are bootstrapped and have paid pilots, typically working in the finance industry and extending in healthcare, in those industries who have the most data pools and need solutions to comply with regulations, data privacy, and all the future coming there.
So let's say 5 to 10 paid customers or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, why would they use your product vs what's out there?
Mainly to get a leapfrogging into the digital transformation. So right now, typically when you look into bigger enterprises or banks, you can take maybe HBO or companies like Mercedes-Benz or whatever. They have a huge data park. It needs a lot of data sources, different departments with different own tools, and they need somehow to combine the data. The problem is typically to copy it to a data lake like Snowflake or Databricks. That it's quite costly, needs a lot of ETL processes, which involves also cost. You need more teams, and that is always staggering. And so we have the possibilities that you don't need to copy it, that you can work with data across the world. It's quite interesting for healthcare when you think about when you have multiple universities or hospitals working on disease or disease or pandemic research like COVID was, or maybe H1N5N will be in the future. So you need different data pools to connect and to have a model running, and you're not allowed to use them. Legal reason. You have HIPAA, you have SOX, you have, of course, GDPR versus the US versus Brasilia versus China, etc.
Right. You started your career in the Luftwaffe.
Yes,
Which has,
I was.
how like tell us about that part of your life. You spent 12 years there, so like, and yet most people when they think about Luftwaffe, they think about the evil Hitler
Yes.
that brought these planes over London. But yeah, me when I check it, it's like, oh, he like worked on his critical thinking and everything in between. So you were in the German Air Force. Tell us about that experience.
Yes. Yeah, that was in the times as I grew up, so I'm quite old. You had to go to the army. That was mandatory, so 1.5 years. And have chosen the Air Force, and then I found it quite interesting and stuck there. Or, signed up for 12 years and worked mainly with airplanes, also in the logistics, and that really helped to focus and also to when you maintain different situations, you can take decisions and you can do decisions quite really fast, and you can defend them later on. That is quite something which helped in the older times. I'm quite not sure how it's today because everything changes. But in this time, this was really like the army was.
So you were in charge of logistics there, right? Was that your role?
Yes, logistics and air traffic management and flying a little bit around.
Flying a little bit around. So that must have been fun. I want to get my pilot's license, although I'm quite dangerous behind any vehicle. So what lessons did you learn of flying that you can apply to your business nowadays?
Different levels. That is so flying is not so hard. So when you understand that you have typically 3 or 4 levels, depends on the area, and when you fly, I think you will do a private license, and when you have the leisure one, which is typically up to 1,000 feet, I guess, then you have Cessnas or whatever. You can fly around. You don't hurt someone. When you have Learjets, and you go at level 2. And 3 is typically professional airplanes, and 4 is military, which has terrain. So we have different, it's quite a startup life, you have 4 different layers: seed, pre-seed, A, B, C, IPO. The same thing. So when you are in lead, you're just flying around a little bit and looking, hey, nice, something on the bottom, oh, I can see you. And when you go into level 2 or 3, then you don't see so much anymore. But you have to, the high speed and a lot of weight to carry, and you have to make sure you bring everybody healthy down. And when you fly in your own plane, okay, what can happen?
Right.
Yeah.
With Databloom nowadays, you deal with platform integration, big data. What's the AI component in the platform?
So we have 2. So one is an AI optimizer, which learns what platforms you have connected and then optimizes your data traffic and your data processing time, which is quite cost-based. It's called cost-based optimizing. Machine learning. And the second one is we build at the moment something like an AI advisor who understands your code and can give you at least debugging information at the beginning and later on to assist you to build the right pipeline for the right job. So that is typically when you go into machine learning or LSTM networks or neuronal networks, that you have someone who understands at least the connected infrastructure, the data pools you have, and also see what you do, and if it's maybe a better version of the solution to that.
Why the open source model? Is it because mass adoption is more doable in that model? Obviously, you add free value to the world. That's cool. But I think there's a business value behind open source, right? Which is probably mass adoption. Yes. What's your thinking behind that model?
So typically when you look at the market, open source always wins. As soon as open source hits the market and has a decent traction, then it is the default stack. It starts with Android is the best example. You go to WordPress, every CMS is, or the most installed CMS in the world is WordPress. That's the biggest parts. And you have Linux, of course. You can go into big data world, Apache Spark, Apache Hadoop, Flink. It's quite mass adopted, and all those tools have a certain part to grow, which is quite really hard. So community growth is the worst thing you can do. But as soon as you have a decent traction, then it will multiply, and it's the typically open source cycle. You have a good product, you attract developers do some cool stuff, adding new stuff, new things, or fixing bugs, which attracts new developer and new people, and then you have the cycle, and then it just quadruples always.
Right. You're selling to a couple of segments here: financial services, government organization, healthcare, retail and e-commerce, and utilities and energy. Tell us about each of these segments, why you chose them specifically, and how do you sell to these folks?
So finance, because my co-founder and I come from finance. So Jessica was 15 years, or is 15 years on the Wall Street as a senior VP for treasury management and extensive data analytics, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, I think. I worked at Allianz, who's a German insurer, worldwide active, in the back office or back insurance. And there was mainly the problem, especially with data, different data pools, different technologies, and then how to get the stuff together. And it's always getting gray hairs, and it was not fun to do that. That was the main thing where we founded the company. Energy, I worked at E.ON quite a bit and was chief architect there. And I had a little bit my passion for renewables and changing a really old world. That energy is the oldest, not the oldest business, or one of the oldest business for industrialization in the world, and nothing changes. You have cables and you have power and you have transformers. They are mostly 100 years old. That's that change that it's quite interesting and also challenging, and that's why we also work with utilities. Healthcare, of course, we had some pilots with during the COVID period with multiple hospitals across the world, and they exactly needed a federated solution to access data pools and to build some stochastic models, how the virus spread in different circumstances, depends on the demographics. And government, it's public affairs, typically they come from themselves. So it's nothing new.
And how do you sell to these guys? Is it more marketing? Do you do cold outreach as well? For example, I use Apollo to mail folks that would be interested in my product. How do you sell to these guys?
So there's a mix of everything you said. So we use LinkedIn, of course, as a main connections, and we have blogs. They are quite heavily read and also linked. We are conferences, people searching for us. So it's really a mix of all. We have some tests with cold mails. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. Depends also on the market and on the weather. So right now it doesn't make any sense to do any marketing because the world, at least the Western world, is dead. So everybody's on vacations, or has typically the switch between the school years, and the business is mostly a little bit slowed down right now. So it's a good time to build something and add new features.
Are you raising capital right now?
At the moment, yes. So we have started a few weeks back to raise our first round. Talking with a few interested parties, but it's not really that we in a rush, that we think, we need money or we are dead. So we have a good runway of 18 months, 20 months roughly. So
how did you meet and select your co-founder, Jessica, and Prof/Dr. Beatkar?
So Kaustup, we knew since a long time, and he did the research with Jochen, my co-founder, for automated data regulation for federated processing, which is quite a cool thing. That means the stack detects where your data is and then applies federated data regulation rules on your data, which is quite good for typically regulated industries. Jessica, I met 2 years ago, and then we talked about the finance industry and banking and all that nifty grifties you have there. And then so she joined in the founding team as we built the company last year in Miami. And and Sui is part of the team too, and she is also a renewed researcher. Everything what we have is built on research. We have extensive papers out since 2015. So it's something we're deep tech, really backed by science.
Right. Last but not least, you had a couple of exits, Infinimesh, XWarp, Infinite Devices. Why did you exited those business, and did these exits change your life in terms of finance and in terms of the freedom they gave you?
So XWarp was the first one. It was 2002, 2003. Yes, that was, and it was in Cincinnati, and it was got sold to a larger company in Cincinnati. And then, yeah, I went out and everything fine. It was a company that built firewalls in these times based on BSD to protect credit card transactions. So when you go 2000 to a market and you had a scanner with you, then you could sniff all the credit card things on plain text, because HTTPS was not really well known. And so that people did something to connect that and secure the transactions. InfiniMesh is an IoT platform, cloud native. That was a side project and got open source produced or used by other ones. And Infinite Devices is a German startup, so we did a merger with another company, and I went out and say to AIoT, so AI-based industrial IoT, mainly in sound processing and sound management. It's quite cool stuff. So when you have security, or what's it built right now is a rattle detector. When you go to airports, typically, and you have the fence there, and people want to cut it and want to get into, so you make typically a noise, and they have small sensors put it on this fence, and it detects the sound, and then alarms that something happens, and it's quite really safe because it only detects the sounds when you cut it, and not when some animal runs or whatever.
Right, Alex, thank you for showing up today. Where can people find out more about you and Databloom?
So yes, check our website, Databloom.ai, of course. We are on LinkedIn, Hacking Face. We have a small energy neural network for energy consumption prediction. Yeah, that's Google us, find us.